The fortress of Winmore stood battered beneath a leaden sky, the bitter winds of the 7th month of the dark winter howling through its stone corridors. Torn banners of House Villain clung weakly to broken spires, and below the eastern wall, the black flags of the Empire of Vordren spread like a plague across the icy fields. Lady Elira Villain stood on a crumbling balcony, a fur-lined cloak of white wolfskin rippling behind her. Her pale gray eyes stared down at the siege camp, thousands of soldiers, fires dotting the dusk like distant stars, the war drums silent but ever present in the mind. Behind her came footsteps, slow, deliberate. Lady Meleys, her stepmother, emerged from the shadows, hands clasped neatly in front of her. "They've sent a final ultimatum," Meleys said coolly. "General Kalen Vordren demands we open the gates within 3 days. If not, he will raze Winmore to ash." Elira didn't flinch. Her hands gripped the icy stone of the railing, her breath a cloud in the frozen air. Below, the people of her land huddled in fear. Children starved. Soldiers bled dry. The last food stores had long since rotted. And what terms does he offer, in exchange for mercy? Elira asked. Meleys's lips curled ever so slightly. He asks for you. As his wife. The words struck like an arrow to the gut. Elira turned sharply, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is a jest." "It is not," said Meleys. "He does not wish to waste men or time. A marriage, bloodless, official, binding. A political conquest disguised as a union. And you, or the price." Silence stretched between them. Elira's heart pounded. Marriage to the enemy. The son of the emperor who had slaughtered her people and burned her homeland. Yet she knew, there were no good choices left. Only survival or death. That night, in the dimly lit war hall, Elira sat with her stepmother and the last remaining generals. No one voiced what they all knew: if she refused, Winmore would fall. And with it, every soul inside. "You should accept," the oldest general murmured. "History forgets maidens, but it remembers those who preserved kingdoms." Elira laughed bitterly. "History has never belonged to women." Meleys leaned in, whispering, "Only the living can claim vengeance." At dawn, a white flag was raised over Winmore. The gates creaked open, and Lady Elira, wrapped in white and steel, descended the stone path beside a Vordren envoy. Her people watched from behind barred windows, silent and mournful. No cheers. No farewells. Only the sound of the wind, and the distant gallop of hooves. Across the field stood a man in black armor, motionless astride a midnight stallion. General Kalen Vordren, her husband-to-be, her captor, her only shield against annihilation. Their eyes met. No hatred. No longing. Only the heavy silence of duty. Two pawns in a game far larger than them both. The journey to Castle Vordren took 3 days and 3 nights. Elira barely slept. The cold gnawed through the thickest furs, and the silence in the carriage was heavier than iron. No one spoke to her, not the guards riding beside the wheels, not the squire who brought her water and food, and certainly not General Kalen, who remained ever ahead, his black steed a ghost in the mist. When at last the towers of Castle Vordren pierced the cloudy horizon, Elira felt the first true pang of dread. The castle was not merely a fortress. It was a monument to power and fear. Tall black spires loomed like the fingers of some ancient god, clawing at the skies. Walls of obsidian stone ringed the mountain it was built upon, and even from a distance, Elira could see hundreds of banners flapping from every parapet, each marked with the Black Hawk of House Vordren. The gates opened without ceremony. No trumpet, no cheer. The procession passed through a gauntlet of soldiers who watched her with unreadable expressions. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their suspicion. A foreign bride. A political bribe. As the carriage came to a halt, Kalen approached. His armor gleamed, polished and engraved, but his face was unadorned by warmth. He extended a gloved hand. "Elira of Winmore," he said. "You are now a guest of the Empire." She took his hand slowly, cautiously. "And a prisoner." His jaw tensed, but he did not disagree. Inside, Castle Vordren was colder than any battlefield. The halls were vast, echoing with steps that vanished into silence. Tapestries of conquest lined the stone walls. Battles won, kings humbled, enemies crucified in glorious brushstrokes. Elira was led past them like a lamb through a history of slaughter. Her chambers were large but stark, stone floors, high windows, no fire lit. A maidservant, young and timid, helped her undress and brush out the road dust from her hair. "They do not want you here," the girl whispered when no one else was near. "Not even the Empress." Ellie returned. "The Empress. She returns from the border soon. She hates the general's ambitions, and she will see you as his weakness." Elira said nothing, but her heart stirred uneasily. That evening, a formal supper was held. Not in celebration, but for politics. She was seated beside Kalen at the high table, above a sea of armored nobles and courtiers, all murmuring like snakes in the reeds. Kalen wore his crown of battle-won steel. Elira wore a pale gray gown, simple but regal. Her chin was high, her eyes watchful. To her left sat Lord Harvin Vordren, Kalen's cousin, slender, sharp-eyed, with a voice like honeyed poison. "A noble choice, General," Harvin said with a smile. "Though I wonder if she came willingly, or if her people were merely out of arrows." Kalen did not respond. Elira smiled thinly. "We had arrows, my lord. But no more time." The remark stirred low laughter across the table, but not from Kalen. His gaze remained forward, unreadable. Later, in the quiet of the corridor, Kalen walked beside her. "You held your tongue better than most men would have," he said quietly. "Years of diplomacy taught me when not to use it." He hesitated. "I know you think me a villain." "I think you're a weapon," she replied. "Used by your father. Forged by war." He stopped walking. "And what are you, Elira?" She met his eyes. "A shield. Nothing more." They stood in silence, both too tired to speak further. Then Kalen turned away, his cloak trailing behind him like shadow. Back in her chambers, Elira stared at the window. Outside, snow began to fall, coating the black stones of the Empire with quiet, deceptive peace. But inside, the game had already begun. And she would not be the first piece sacrificed. Days passed slowly within the high walls of Castle Vordren. Elira kept to her chambers mostly, wandering its cold stone halls only when watched. Servants avoided her gaze. Guards shadowed her steps. Even the birds avoided the spires. On the 5th day, she was summoned. The chamber was long and candlelit, a narrow table stretching like a dagger between two thrones. Kalen sat in one, the other remained empty. He gestured for her to sit. She did. "I've received word from my father," Kaelin said flatly. He is displeased. Elira raised a brow. Because you offered mercy instead of blood. Kaelin didn't answer. Instead, he slid a scroll across the table. Elira opened it. An imperial decree, official, iron-inked. The marriage shall occur within 7 days. Her heart clenched, though she showed no fear. I expected no less, she murmured. Kaelin leaned back. You still have the choice to refuse. Elira looked him dead in the eye. Do I? Silence. No, he said. You don't. Afterward, she retreated to the castle library, one of the only places she could go unescorted. There, among ancient books and forgotten banners, she found Sister Aura, an elderly abbess who maintained the old tomes. They spoke little at first, but Aura warmed to Elira's wit and questions. In whispers, she taught Elira the history of the Empire, its rise through conquest, its betrayals, its crumbling moral core. There are secrets in these walls, Aura said one night. And not all of them sleep. Elira leaned in. Tell me. Aura's eyes flickered toward the old stone tiles beneath their feet. This castle was built atop ruins of an older kingdom, long before Vordren. And below it, tunnels, lost, dangerous, but still there. A path, a hope, maybe. But escape wasn't the only thought burning in Elira's mind anymore. The next day, she received a visitor. The Empress herself. She swept into Elira's chambers like a storm, veiled in black and crowned with garnets. Her voice was smoke and steel. So, this is the girl who made my son a coward. Elira bowed slightly. I did not ask to be spared, Your Majesty. No, said the Empress. But you used your blood like a key to open his heart. You may have fooled the general, but you will not fool me. She stepped close. You are here to dilute our line. To soften our legacy. I see it in your eyes. I am here, Elira replied, because I chose to live. And because your son chose to end a war. The Empress's lip curled. He was bred for fire. You bring him frost. And with that, she swept away. That night, a note was slipped beneath Elira's door. Written in careful hand. If you seek the truth, meet me in the crypts. Midnight. Come alone. No signature. No seal. She stared at the note for a long time, heart thudding. At midnight, she lit a taper candle and stepped barefoot into the stairwell. The castle groaned in the wind like a sleeping beast. Shadows clawed at every corner. She descended stone after stone until the air turned damp and cold. The crypts were vast, columns rising like the trunks of ancient trees. Statues of emperors long dead loomed in silence, stone eyes watching her every move. Then, movement. A cloaked figure stepped from behind a pillar. Lady Elira, a voice said, low and urgent. It was Lord Harvin. She froze. What is this? She demanded. Harvin pulled back his hood. I come with an offer, he said. A chance to rule. I am not interested in games. Oh, but you're in one. Whether you like it or not. My cousin may think he's fallen on the sword of peace, but the Empire doesn't run on peace. He stepped closer. Help me remove him. Quietly. No blood. I will take his place, and you may keep your crown. Not as a hostage. As a queen. Elira's blood ran cold. You want me to betray him? No, Harvin said. He betrayed the Empire. You would merely be correcting his error. Elira stared at him. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Back in her room, she stared at the fire. A storm was coming, but she didn't know yet whether she would be its shield, or its spark. The morning after her crypt meeting, Elira awoke to the faint scent of rosemary on her pillow. A single white rose sat on her table, bound with black silk. It wasn't there when she'd gone to sleep. No message, no servant in sight, just the flower. A warning, or a reminder. She burned it in the hearth without hesitation. At the midday council, Elira was summoned to sit beside Kaelin in the Hall of Banners. It was a cold, echoing room lined with sigils of conquered houses. The generals and advisors of the empire surrounded the table, but it was Kaelin who held their attention. 2 border fortresses have risen in revolt, said one messenger. Inspired by your mercy, General. The nobles believe the empire has grown soft. A murmur of discontent swept the room. Crush them, growled an older lord. They dare question your rule, added another. They must be reminded who wears the steel. Kaelin said nothing for a long while. Then he turned to Elira. What would you do? He asked, aloud. A silence fell so sudden, you could hear the wind outside. Elira kept her face neutral. I would send envoys, she said. But not to threaten, to listen. Understand what wounds fester. And then bind them, before they bleed the empire dry. Some scoffed. Others stared. Kaelin nodded once. Send envoys, he ordered. The table erupted in protest. Only Harvin smirked, arms folded in amusement. Later, in the war gallery, Kaelin stood alone before a massive painting of his father, Emperor Ulrich the Black Wolf, wreathed in fire, blade drawn mid-charge. He didn't look up when Elira entered. You made enemies today, she said softly. So did you. She stepped beside him. Why did you ask for my counsel? Kaelin's gaze remained fixed ahead. Because I don't know what peace looks like. But I know you do. For a brief moment, Elira saw the child beneath the soldier, the boy who had grown up under iron discipline, trained to conquer, not govern. You'll never win peace by ruling like your father, she said. I'm not my father. No, but you live in his house. They stood there in silence. And something between them shifted. That night, Elira returned to the crypts, but not to meet Harvin. She needed to see for herself. With a stolen key and a single taper, she descended deeper into the ancient stone than she had dared before. Past statues and tombs, down into forgotten roots. There, she found it, an old, bricked tunnel. Carved with runes in a language she could not read. She marked it on parchment and returned to the surface just before dawn. 2 days before the wedding, a festival was declared in the capital. Fires were lit in the lower districts, and merchants sold charms said to bless war and union alike. But inside the castle, nothing felt joyful. Kaelin trained alone in the yard for hours. His strikes were mechanical, brutal. The guards kept distance. Elira watched from the ramparts. Sister Aura approached her with a folded letter. It arrived by falcon, the old abbess said. From your steward in Winmore. Elira unfolded it quickly. Inside, a warning. Your uncle rides for Vordren. He has aligned with Harvin. They plan to disrupt the wedding, and seize power. Elira's hand tightened on the page. So this was the game now. Not just marriage, but a coup. And she was the prize to be won. That night, Elira met Kaelin in the old chapel, where few dared walk. She told him everything: Harvin's offer, her uncle's betrayal, the tunnels beneath the castle. Kaelin's face darkened. "Why tell me this?" he asked. "You could still take the offer." "Because if I'm going to survive," she said, "I'd rather do it beside someone who doesn't lie to himself." He looked at her then, truly looked. And for once, he didn't see a hostage. He saw a partner. They stood beneath the broken stained glass window. The moonlight poured in. "We marry in 2 days, Kaelin said. "But if we're to survive it, we need to strike first." Elira nodded. "Then let's begin." The halls of Castle Vordren transformed overnight. Silk drapes in the imperial colors, black and crimson, hung from the rafters. Golden lanterns lit every corridor. Musicians practiced solemn hymns in the old chapel while courtiers whispered behind gloves, fanning rumors like sparks before a storm. In 2 days, Elira Winmore would marry General Kaelin Vordren. But beneath the celebration, war drums beat silently. Elira's chambers were filled with servants and seamstresses fitting her bridal robes. The main gown was a marvel of embroidery, woven with silver thread to represent the peace forged between the Empire and her homeland. Every stitch felt like a chain. Lady Marian, Kaelin's aunt and a sharp-tongued political vulture, watched the preparations with a thin smile. "You'll look the part, at least," she said. "Even if no one believes the story." "What story is that?" Elira asked coolly. "That a girl with Winmore eyes and Winmore blood would ever truly love the man who destroyed her city." Elira did not blink. Perhaps the Empire should prepare for stranger stories than that. Elsewhere, in the armory, Kaelin met with Captain Wren, his most trusted officer. "Elira's uncle rides under a false banner. If he reaches the gates during the wedding, we may face an uprising from within," Kaelin said. "And Harvin?" Wren asked. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Leave him be, for now. Let him think his plan is working. When he moves, we'll move first." "And the girl?" Wren asked carefully. Kaelin turned to the window, looking out over the frozen courtyard. Snow began to fall again. "She's more dangerous than any of them," he said quietly. "But she's the only one I trust." That evening, Elira descended into the hidden tunnel beneath the crypt. With a lantern and a map drawn by memory, she began laying the groundwork for escape, if escape became necessary. The tunnel stretched like a buried serpent beneath the castle. Along its walls were carvings of an older age, swords bent into plows, women crowned in laurel rather than iron. She wondered who had lived here before the Empire consumed it. Suddenly, she heard a sound behind her. She whirled, knife in hand. But it was only Kaelin. "I should have guessed you wouldn't rest before the wedding," he said, amused. "You followed me. I trusted you'd come here." They stood in the flickering light, shadows dancing around them. Elira sighed. "You still think this wedding will stop the coup?" "No," he admitted. "But it'll reveal who's willing to break the facade. And then we'll know who our enemies are." They stared at each other for a moment. Then Kaelin said, "We could run. Tonight. Through this tunnel. Leave the Empire to devour itself." Elira shook her head slowly. "My people would be butchered for it. Your soldiers would swear loyalty to Harvin. No, if we run now, there'll be nothing left worth saving." He nodded once. "Then we stand together." The next morning, Elira was summoned again by the empress. This time, the old woman offered a crown. It was a bridal circlet of blackened silver, set with obsidian shards. A gift, the empress said, with the voice of someone giving a poisoned apple. So that history remembers you tried to wear the mask of a queen. Elira met her gaze. And when history forgets your name, she replied, I'll still be standing. The empress didn't speak. But the air grew colder. Later that night, Elira met with Sister Aura to finalize one more detail. If the wedding is attacked, Elira said, I want the tunnel sealed behind us. No one must follow. And if you die, Aura asked softly, then let the empire burn. The day before the wedding, snow fell thick as ash. From the north, her uncle's army approached. Within the walls, Harvin moved his spies into position. But Kaelin and Elira prepared not for a wedding, but for war. The bells rang out over Vordren like morning chimes. At dawn, Elira was bathed, perfumed, and dressed in silence. The robe they draped on her weighed more than her armor ever had. Threads of silver and blood red laced her sleeves. Her hair was bound with strands of jet, braided with tiny chains, an imperial custom meant to show the bride's submission to the empire. She let them tie her hair like they tied her fate, neatly, tightly, with no room to escape. Across the castle, Kaelin dressed in his ceremonial armor, blackened steel etched with wolves and fire. No sword on his belt, only the golden hilt of the Empire's peace blade, a weapon never meant to be drawn. He stared at it, then turned to Ren. Are the men in place? Ren nodded. The loyal ones. 24 in the chapel. Another 50 hidden near the feast hall. If Harvin moves, we strike first. And my mother. She will not interfere, publicly. Kaelin gave a dry laugh. That's not comforting. At midday, the great chapel was filled to the brim. Nobles from across the empire sat shoulder to shoulder, draped in furs and feathers, jewels and malice. Soldiers lined the walls, their faces unreadable beneath helms. Elira entered to silence. She walked alone down the aisle between two armies pretending to celebrate. Her uncle was not yet among the crowd, but she knew he would come. This show of peace was too tempting a target. Kaelin waited at the altar, stone-faced. When she reached him, he did not smile. But he took her hand. The priest began the vows. Do you, Kaelin of House Vordren, take Elira of House Winmore? I do, he said without hesitation. Elira met his eyes. Do you, Elira of House Winmore, take Kaelin of House Vordren? She opened her mouth, and a horn blasted outside the chapel. Gasps rang out. Kaelin's eyes flared. He turned his head, just as the massive chapel doors slammed shut. A heartbeat passed. Then the glass shattered above them. Crossbow bolts rained down. Screaming. Panic. Harvin's men burst through side entrances, blades drawn, cutting down guards in red armor. Kaelin shoved Elira behind the altar and drew the ceremonial blade from his belt. It wasn't decorative after all. He waded into the fray, striking with precision, cutting down a masked attacker with a single blow. Elira ducked beneath a bench, pulled a knife from her boot, and slit the throat of a would-be assassin crawling toward the royal pews. Blood soaked her wedding gown. The Empress stood still in the chaos, unblinking. Sister Aura helped guide the wounded toward the crypt stairs. Down. Through the tunnel. Ren called out from the chapel balcony. They've breached the western hall. Kalen cut down 2 more attackers before grabbing Elira's wrist. Run, he barked. She didn't argue. Together, they bolted through the hidden side passage behind the altar. Dash. In the corridor, they met 3 loyal guards. Elira's uncle has arrived, one said breathlessly. He brought 200 men. They ride for the throne room. Kalen cursed. He means to take the crown while the wedding burns. They reached the crypt stairs. Aura waited, pale and grim. Seal it once we pass, Elira told her. No. Aura pressed a pendant into her hand. You may yet need to come back. They fled into the dark. Dash. The tunnel beneath the chapel was ancient, damp with snowmelt and time. Their footsteps echoed like distant drums. Kalen held a torch. Elira gripped her knife. We need to reach the east tower, she said. From there, we can regroup. He glanced at her. You still want to fight? Elira's eyes burned. This was never a wedding. It was a test. And we passed. No, she whispered. Not yet. Dash. They emerged into the lower halls, only to be met by more steel. Harvin stood at the foot of the east tower stairs, flanked by soldiers wearing the gold-trimmed cloaks of the Emperor's guard. Elira, he said smoothly, you look stunning. She said nothing. Kalen stepped forward. I should have known you'd strike before the kiss. Harvin smiled. The Empire needs lions, cousin. Not lambs who bleed for mercy. He gestured to his men. Step aside. Give me the girl. And I'll spare the rest of your soldiers. Elira raised her voice. Give me a sword. Kalen looked at her, startled. Then he drew his dagger and placed it in her hand. Harvin scoffed. You'll fight in that dress. She stepped forward, blood and silk trailing behind her. I've bled in worse. The east tower echoed with steel. Harvin stood at the base, smug and shining in borrowed glory. Behind him, his soldiers waited like hungry dogs. Above, snow drifted through the shattered windows. The air was thick with smoke and dust from the chapel ambush. Kalen's jaw tensed as he held his sword low, prepared to fight. But it was Elira who stepped forward, her wedding dress soaked crimson from knee to hem, her hair unbound, and Kalen's dagger in her hand. Harvin's laughter bounced off the cold walls. You think to strike me down in a bridal gown, niece? No, Elira said. I intend to cut you open and let the Empire see what spills out. He raised a brow. Bold. Suicidal. Very Winmore. Kalen growled, she's not alone. I know, Harvin replied, and then raised his hand. At once, 2 of the Emperor's guard turned their blades, not on Elira, but on Harvin's own men. Gasps. Screams. Steel on steel. The trap had snapped shut, but not the one Harvin planned. Dash. Chaos again. In the narrow stairwell, swords clashed, boots slipped, men died fast. Elira moved like flame through the gaps, slashing tendons and throats. Her gown tangled at her feet, so she tore it at the knees. A blade grazed her cheek. Another cracked her shoulder. But she didn't stop. Kalen fought beside her, brutal and precise. He didn't defend her, he followed her, covering gaps, clearing space. Harvin saw the tide turning and shouted for retreat. No, Elira roared. He dies. She chased him up the stairwell, Kalen right behind. The tower's top chamber overlooked the burning chapel far below. Smoke drifted in through arrow slits. Bells still tolled as if mocking the carnage. Harvin stood in the center of the room, panting, sword drawn now. "You're mad," he spat. "You'd spill family blood on your wedding day. You spilled my father's blood," Elira hissed. "And you tried to use mine to paint your banner." He lunged. Kaelin blocked him, but it was Elira who struck low, jamming her dagger through Harvin's thigh. He howled and staggered. Kaelin disarmed him with one swift move. Harvin dropped to his knees. "I was meant to save the Empire," he gasped. Elira stood above him, blade shaking in her hand. "You were meant to die forgotten." She drove the knife into his heart. Silence. She stood over his corpse as Kaelin placed a hand on her arm, not to stop her, but to steady her. They didn't speak. Not yet. The snow fell through the ruined ceiling, covering Harvin's body inch by inch. Hours later, the fighting in the castle had ebbed. The surviving generals demanded answers. The Empress demanded blood. The people demanded order. Elira gave them all a name: Harvin. The traitor. The usurper. The butcher. Kaelin stood beside her, silent as the pyres were lit. That night, in the war room, now draped with ash and broken glass, Kaelin poured wine into 2 chipped cups. Elira took hers and drank without hesitation. "We'll have to rule now," she said bitterly. He nodded. "Peace forged in blood." She met his eyes. "Will we survive it?" Kaelin shrugged. "We survived the wedding." They both laughed. "Just once, just barely." She rose to leave. As she stepped through the doorway, Kaelin said, "You were magnificent." Elira paused. "Don't fall in love with me, General." "I already did," he replied. She didn't look back. The castle still stank of blood. By morning, the snow outside had turned a pale gray. Inside, servants scrubbed the chapel floors, scraping dried gore from marble while the nobles held council in the throne room. Elira sat beside Kaelin on the high dais, no longer in a wedding gown, but in mourning black, a deliberate choice. Let them remember what the Empire had done to her. The Empress had not spoken to her since the night of the coup. She sat 3 chairs down, wrapped in furs, her expression unreadable. But her eyes never left Elira's. A herald read the list of the dead. 12 nobles, 33 soldiers, 1 foreign envoy, and Lord Harvin Vordren, accused of high treason. Kaelin stood. "Let history record," he said, "that this alliance, forged in war, survived fire. That our enemies were those who wear our colors, not those who bore the mark of Winmore." A silence followed. Then Elira rose. "And let it be known that peace is not bought with lies. My uncle sought to use my bloodline to claim the throne. But I did not die. I stood. I fought. I will not be silent in your court, or any other." Murmurs spread like wind through dry leaves. Some nodded in grim agreement. Others looked afraid. The Empress said nothing. But her knuckles widened. After the court dismissed, Elira returned to her quarters, flanked by Kaelin's guards. Waiting for her inside was a letter, unmarked, sealed in red wax. She broke it carefully. She stared at it for a long time. Then burned it. Later that evening, Kaelin met her in the rookery. He'd come from overseeing the reconstruction, training new guards, replacing every soldier tied to Harvin's inner circle. "Do you know how many letters came this morning?" he asked. "Too many. 49. She raised a brow. "And what did they say?" "Congratulations. Threats. Demands. Proposals of alliance. Proposals of marriage, to you, not me." Elira sighed. "Tell them all I'm already married." He grinned. "To war. To the idea of surviving it. In the coming days, Elira began to take control of her own affairs. She visited the wounded, listened to complaints from both Winmore refugees and Empire-born farmers. She drafted reforms for the treatment of captured nobles. She assigned a spy to every noble who smiled too brightly. She sent 3 assassins back in coffins. By the end of the week, even the Empress had to admit, if only in silence, that Elira was no puppet bride. But then came the letter from Winmore. Her mother was alive, and under siege. Kaelin read the missive beside her in stunned silence. "The North never accepted your marriage," he said. "They think you were taken. They think you betrayed them." Elira's voice was flat. "They're half right. Do we send soldiers?" "No," she said. "We go ourselves." That night, she stood in the chapel again. It was cleaner now, the blood gone, but the scars remained. Shattered windows. Burned pews. A stain beneath the altar. Kaelin found her kneeling there, not in prayer, but in memory. "She taught me to fight in secret," she whispered. "My mother said I'd need to one day." She was right. He knelt beside her. "You don't have to go back alone." She looked at him. "I know." They rose together. In the courtyard, snow fell again, heavy and slow. The gates opened, and the long march back to the north began. The road to Winmore cut through snow-choked passes, past frozen rivers and sunless woods where wolves howled at dusk. Elira rode at the head of her column, her black cloak trailing behind her like the shadow of war. Beside her rode Kaelin, wrapped in furs, his sword never far from reach. Behind them, 100 riders flew, no banners, only steel. They bore neither the red of the Empire nor the silver of Winmore. Elira had ordered that. She wanted no colors until the North chose what she was. Traitor. Or daughter. They crossed into the northern borderlands on the 10th day. Elira recognized the trees, the distant curve of the cliffs where she had once trained in secret with her mother's guards. Everything looked smaller, older, as if the land itself had aged in her absence. Villages they passed did not cheer. Doors stayed closed. Smoke curled from chimneys, but no one stepped out. Elira could feel their eyes watching through the cracks. The Winmore crest had been scorched from many signs. In its place, nothing. "They're afraid of you," Kaelin said softly. "No," Elira replied. "They're afraid I became one of you." By the time they reached the first garrison town, Kaelin's scouts returned with grim faces. "The siege continues at Hollowreach," said Wren. "Your mother holds the inner keep, but the rebels control the outer walls." "And who leads them?" Elira asked. The scout hesitated. "Esser Joran of the Broken Pike." Her jaw clenched. "He trained me to fight." Wren said nothing. Elira turned her horse. "Then it's time I returned the favor." The march to Hollowreach was quiet, no resistance, no fanfare. Only smoke on the horizon. Elira remembered Hollowreach well. The Castle of Storms. The last northern stronghold. Its towers were taller than memory, but now they were blackened with soot. The gates had been shattered. Siege ladders burned in the snow. The rebel camp was dug in deep, with makeshift palisades and catapults aimed at the keep. The banners flying over the rebel tents bore no crest, only red cloth, blood loyalty, not house allegiance. Kalen studied them from a ridge. They outnumber your mother's loyalists 2 to 1. Elira's eyes didn't blink. We don't need numbers. We need truth. That night, Elira entered the rebel camp alone. Kalen tried to stop her. She didn't let him. Wrapped in a peasant's cloak, she slipped past watchfires and patrols until she stood near the main tent, Joran's command. The guards were old men. Men she had once known. She stepped into the light. Some gasped. Others reached for swords. Elira Winmore. A voice bellowed from the tent. Joran emerged, taller than she remembered, beard gray and tangled, eyes full of betrayal. You dare come here? I came to speak. There's nothing left to say. You owe my mother your life. I owed her loyalty, he snapped. And she gave her daughter to the Empire. I gave myself, Elira said coldly. To stop a war you couldn't win. She walked slowly toward the fire, never breaking eye contact. I bled to stop Harvin's coup. I fought beside Kalen Vordren, yes, but not for the Empire. For peace. Joran spat into the snow. And what did it cost you? How much Winmore runs through your blood now? Elira drew a dagger from beneath her cloak and sliced her palm open. My blood's still red, she whispered. Test it yourself. The crowd stared. One woman wept. Joran looked shaken, but did not move. Then, a rider galloped into the camp from the eastern hills. The keep's gates are opening. The scout cried. The Lady Winmore rides out. Moments later, the rebel camp stood frozen as Elira's mother, Lady Alindra, rode through the snow with 30 riders at her back. She saw Elira first. Her horse stopped so suddenly it kicked up snow. Elira knelt. Mother, she whispered. Lady Alindra dismounted. She stared at her daughter. Then slowly, silently, she embraced her. Joran dropped to one knee. Forgive me, Lady Winmore. You thought wrong, Alindra said coldly. But you were not alone. Her eyes flicked to Elira. There will be reckoning. But not tonight. Later, as fires were doused and weapons sheathed, Elira sat beside Kalen in her childhood chamber. You bled for them, he said softly. And still they doubt you. They always will, she replied. And that's how I'll know I'm doing something right. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Winmore held a feast, not to celebrate Elira's return, but to make peace visible. In the great hall of Hollowreach, where banners of wolves once hung proud and heavy, tables were laid with roasted venison, black bread, and frost wine. The walls still bore scorch marks from the siege. There was no music. Lady Alindra sat at the high table, flanked by her captains. Kalen sat opposite, eyes sharp and quiet. Elira sat between them, caught between two worlds that barely spoke. The fire crackled. Knives scraped. Outside, the snow howled. Elira raised her goblet. To those who bled for Winmore, she said, and to those who still do. There were murmurs of agreement. One man barked a laugh. You bled in a wedding gown, he muttered, just loud enough. Lady Elindra did not rebuke him. Elira looked at him. Sir Merrick, once her riding instructor. You taught me to fall from horseback without breaking my neck, she said. You never taught me to fall from grace and live. The room fell quiet again. Later that night, as the feast thinned and soldiers dozed at tables, Kaelin approached Lady Elindra in the corridor. You should speak more gently of her, he said. She brought you peace. The Lady of Winmore looked at him with steel in her eyes. She brought me fire. My lands burned. My name was spat in noble courts. I buried more than daughters that winter. She is your daughter still. She's also your wife, Elindra replied. Don't forget where your loyalty truly lies, Vordren. Kaelin's jaw twitched, but he bowed and walked away. In the darkness of the rookery, Elira sat alone with a letter in her hands. It bore no crest, but she recognized the handwriting. Winmore ink. Her cousin Ansel. She read it once, twice. Elira burned the letter. But she didn't sleep. The next morning, the council met. Lady Elindra sat at the head, robes dark as midnight. Elira beside her. Joran across from them. Kaelin stood at the map table. We need food, said one captain. The siege drained our stores. And we need arms, said another. The Empire may smile, but their garrisons grow fatter. Elira spread a new map. We can trade across the Iceford route, she said. Neutral lands. No taxes. No flags. And risk pirates. Joran snorted. Better pirates than imperial tribute. Lady Elindra raised a hand. My daughter speaks with fire. But fire alone won't feed the mountain clans. Elira stared. Then what will? Another war. No, her mother said. A wedding. The room fell still. Kaelin stiffened. Elira narrowed her eyes. To whom? Not you, Lady Elindra said. But your cousin Rin. To a border duchess. A symbolic bond. It shows the empire that Winmore binds its blood where it pleases. And me? Elira asked. You remain unwed. A sword, not a seal. A threat, not a promise. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kaelin turned to leave the chamber. Elira followed. In the frost-lit stables, Kaelin stood staring at the mountains. She wants to unmake us, he said. She wants to survive, Elira replied. And she thinks love makes us weak. Is she wrong? Elira touched the scar along her shoulder, the one Harvin gave her the night of the wedding. She's wrong, she whispered. But power makes her brave. Kaelin turned to her, fire in his eyes. And what makes you brave? You. That night, Elira stood alone in the old war room, where Winmore's greatest victories had once been planned. The walls bore swords from 5 generations. She traced her fingers along one hilt. They would not give her loyalty. They would not give her peace. So she would take it. The first snowfall of spring came early. Fat white flakes drifted over Hollowreach, hiding the scars of siege. But inside the keep, old wounds reopened, silent and raw. Elira paced the war room alone. Maps scattered across the table. Her breath frosted in the cold air. Someone had left a window open, or perhaps a spy had come and gone. The message she'd intercepted burned in her hand. Greater than, the daughter is stubborn. She threatens our work. Prepare contingencies. Lady Elindra has agreed to the exchange. No seal. No signature. But she knew the hand. Her mother's. She confronted her in the high tower at dawn. Lady Alindra was watching the mountains when Elira entered, flanked by Kaelin and 2 loyal guards. I intercepted your raven, Elira said coldly. The older woman did not turn. Then you've learned to be truly northern. Elira's voice was like a drawn bowstring. What exchange? What deal did you make behind my back? Now Alindra faced her. You are Winmore, but you are also Empire. The North will never trust you. Not while you wear his ring. Kaelin stiffened. Elira took a step closer. So you mean to trade me? Hand me to the court as a threat? Or a hostage? Alindra's lips thinned. I mean to preserve Winmore. Even if it costs me you. For the first time, Elira felt something crack, not her resolve, but her certainty. That deep-rooted belief that somewhere beneath the cold, her mother still saw her as a daughter. But Alindra's face was stone. You made yourself an empress, the lady said. Now bear its weight. I made myself a shield. Elira shouted. So you wouldn't have to sacrifice another daughter. The silence that followed was colder than any mountain wind. Then Alindra spoke, quiet and cruel. I never asked you to. By dusk, Elira stood in the armory, watching Kaelin strap on his sword. She'll move soon, he said. If she has a plan, it's already in motion. She means to divide us, Elira replied. She wants Winmore to forget me before I return to court. Then let her try. They kissed only once, quick, fierce, and wordless. When they pulled apart, the steel in their eyes was sharper than the blades at their belts. That night, torches lit the great hall. Lady Alindra had summoned the northern clans to announce the marriage of Rin to the Duchess of Grinswood. A new alliance. A new age. Elira stood beside Kaelin, silent, watching the wolves' close ranks around their old queen. Rin gave a weak smile. Elira said nothing. The wine flowed. Laughter echoed. But Kaelin caught it first, the off-rhythm, the strange tilt of too many heads. He leaned toward Elira. We're being surrounded. Elira's eyes swept the hall. 30 guards, none of them hers. Too late. The great doors slammed shut. A sword was drawn, not by a soldier, but by Rin. He pointed it at Kaelin. I'm sorry, he said. But the North must come first. Elira's world went white. She offered me land. A name. Said you'd burn Winmore down for him. Kaelin stepped forward, hand on his hilt. The hall broke into chaos. Guards lunged. Kaelin drew steel. Elira kicked over a wine table to block 2 pikes. Someone screamed. Someone fell. Then came the arrow. It struck Kaelin in the shoulder. He dropped to one knee. Elira. She turned and ran to him, cutting down a soldier with her dagger. They fought back to back. Old training. New fury. Lady Alindra did not rise. She watched from the dais, calm, as though this were all a rehearsal. Then she lifted a hand, and her guards stopped. Enough. The fighting froze. Kaelin bled onto the stone. Elira trembled with rage. You would kill him, she said. You would turn your house into a den of vipers just to erase me. Alindra met her gaze. You were never meant to rule, she said. Only to bleed. Elira stepped forward, holding her dagger, not to strike, but to sever. She took the Winmore pendant from around her neck. The symbol of her house. She dropped it at her mother's feet. I am done with this house, she said. From this moment forward, Winmore is mine by fire, not by blood. She turned, lifting Kaelin onto a waiting horse. And together, they fled into the snow, hunted by the house that once called her daughter. The wilderness welcomed them like a grave. Snow fell in thick curtains as Elira urged their horse through the pine-laced hills north of Hollowreach. Kaelin slumped against her back, bleeding and fevered. His breath came in sharp gasps. Elira, he murmured, leave me. Be quiet, she snapped. Just breathe. Each hoofbeat crushed the silence, but still she heard the howls behind them. Elindra's riders, perhaps, or wolves drawn by blood. Neither mattered. She would kill them all if she had to. They found shelter at dusk. A ruined watchtower, forgotten by both Empire and North. Ivy strangled the walls. The door creaked open with her shoulder, and the horse collapsed just inside. Elira dragged Kaelin to a dry corner. His armor clattered as she undid the straps. I need firewood, she said. You need to run. I did. He caught her hand. His was trembling. I meant without me. She stared at him, and slapped him, hard. He smiled weakly. I missed that. Elira found branches beneath the snow, hacked them free with her dagger, and returned shivering, soaked to the waist. She built a fire with flint and desperation. Smoke coiled upward, and the cold backed off, but only just. Kaelin's wound had gone purple around the edges. She tore up her cloak, soaked it with snowmelt, and pressed it to the arrow gouge. He grunted, teeth bared. This'll scar, she whispered. Another to match yours. I'd rather match your life. By midnight, the fire had dwindled. Elira sat awake, her back against stone, watching Kaelin's chest rise and fall. How had it come to this? She had once believed war would make her queen. Then, that peace would make her beloved. But now, exiled by her own mother, hunted by the blood she tried to save, she wondered if she'd ever belonged anywhere at all. Kaelin stirred. You're crying. No. Yes, he said, eyes fluttering open. You never blinked this much. She laughed softly. And cried harder. The next morning, Elira rode to the nearest hamlet. A fishing village called Flintmere, nestled beside a frozen lake. The people eyed her with suspicion until she tossed a bag of coins at their feet. Bandits took my husband's horse, she said. He needs shelter. They let her in. By nightfall, Kaelin lay in a warm bed above a fisherman's loft, his fever breaking. But rumors swirled fast. A red-haired woman in leathers. A wounded imperial knight. Names unspoken, but understood. Elira knew they couldn't stay. In the days that followed, she traded what jewels she had left for supplies, furs, salt, dry meat, fresh steel. Kaelin healed slowly. He taught a village boy how to hold a sword. She taught a widow how to read. And just for a moment, they lived. But the world would not forget them. A scout arrived in Flintmere on the 7th day. He bore the crescent seal of the imperial court. Elira met him outside the inn, wrapped in a borrowed coat. My lady, he said, kneeling. You are summoned. She tilted her head. By whom? The Empress. Your mother's betrayal has changed things. That night, by firelight, she showed Kaelin the letter. He read it in silence. Do you trust them? He asked. No. But you'll go. I must, she said. Before my mother poisons more than just one court. What if it's a trap? Elira met his gaze. Then let them try. As dawn broke, she packed their things. Kaelin stood by the stable door, one arm still bound in cloth. Once, he said, you asked what makes you brave. She paused. And, he walked to her. You never wait for permission. As they rode south toward the Empire once more, Elira looked back at the snows of Winmore, and whispered a promise into the wind. I'll return, but not as a daughter. As something greater. Something forged in fire. The imperial capital rose from the plains like a wound wrapped in silk. Its towers glittered in the morning sun, spires spearing sky, domes clad in white marble veined with lapis. From afar, it looked divine. But Elira knew better. Beneath the gold roofs were plague-stained alleys. Behind the banners, blood. And somewhere in its glittering halls sat an empress who claimed peace but traded in war. She and Kaelin passed through the city gates dressed not as nobles, but travelers. The guards waved them through without question, too tired, or too bribed, to notice anything unusual. The imperial court had not changed. Perfumed courtiers floated between columns like ghosts, smiling with mouths but not with eyes. News of her arrival slithered ahead of her. By the time she reached the Sun Gallery, a dozen lords and ladies waited, dressed in the finest silks. Some bowed. Others whispered. One curtsied and said, "The flame of the north returns." Elira smiled like a blade. "Careful. You might burn." Kaelin waited outside the chamber as Elira was led into the inner sanctum, the Empress's solar. The air smelled of jasmine and old scrolls. The Empress sat at her writing table, flanked by twin marble lions. She was dressed in mourning black, though no one had died, yet. "Elira," she said without looking up. "You survived. I do that often." The Empress finally looked up. Her eyes were cold iron. "Your mother writes poetry now. All of it treason. And you still read it," Elira said. "Does that make you complicit?" The Empress smiled faintly. "It makes me curious." They stood in silence for a moment. Then the Empress gestured to the map on the table. "Winmore's alliance with Grinswood cuts our trade. The northern lords grow bold. Your mother's betrayal is not just personal, it is political." "She never trusted me," Elira replied. "Now she's giving the wolves what they want." "And what do you want?" the Empress asked. Elira looked her in the eye. "A reckoning." That night, Kaelin and Elira walked the lower city in plain clothes. The streets pulsed with tension. Food lines stretched around corners. Drunken soldiers brawled in alleys. "Peace is breaking," Kaelin said. "They hide it well, but it's coming undone." "They always do," Elira muttered. "The Empire rules with pageants, not pillars." At the old amphitheater, she saw beggars warming themselves beside crumbling statues, monuments to wars that never ended, only changed names. This place wasn't home, but it was the heart of power. And hearts could be pierced. The next morning, Elira sat before the Imperial Council. Dukes, generals, the High Seer. Each wore a mask of patience, but underneath, fear. "Elira of Winmore," one said, "you abandoned your post. Alindru claims your marriage was forged under duress." Kaelin, standing beside her, stiffened. "She lies," Elira said. "And even if she didn't, What does that make you? You arranged it, sanctioned it, celebrated it. Murmurs rippled. The Empress raised a hand. Silence fell. Elira, she said, we face revolt on two fronts, north and east. I need someone ruthless. Someone unbound by nostalgia. Take command of the northern frontier. End your mother's treason, and Winmore is yours. Kaelin leaned close. She's using you. I know, Elira whispered back. But this time, I'll use her first. After the council, a page slipped her a letter under her chamber door. No seal. No signature. Greater than, he's here. In the south wing. Your uncle. The one they swore was dead. Elira's blood froze. Her uncle, the former Lord Marshal Varian of the Empire, had vanished a decade ago, exiled for plotting against the crown. If he was here, something darker stirred beneath the court's surface. She turned to Kaelin. We're not just fighting Winmore anymore. He frowned. Then what? The Empire itself. The south wing of the Imperial Palace was sealed. Officially, it was under restoration, crumbling walls, mold, faded tapestries. Unfit for nobles. But Elira knew the truth. Nothing in the Empire was ever left to decay without reason. It was where they hid the inconvenient. And perhaps, the dangerous. She slipped past guards at midnight with Kaelin close behind. Cloaks drawn. Blades hidden. Every creak of floorboards sounded like a scream. The passage to the south wing had been bricked up years ago, but Elira knew a servant's path. She had crawled it once as a child, chasing echoes of stories no one wanted her to hear. Now the stories chased her. The wing was dark. No lamps, no candles, just moonlight through broken glass. Dust coated everything. Furniture draped like corpses, paintings peeled like dead skin. But there were footprints in the grime. Fresh. Kaelin spotted the first sign. A candle stub. Still warm. Then a whisper. They froze. Elira. The voice was hoarse. Male. Older. She drew her dagger and stepped into the chamber beyond. There, half shrouded in shadow, stood a man with snow-white hair and a scar cutting through one blind eye. Uncle Varian, she breathed. He laughed softly. So they didn't kill you after all. He looked smaller than she remembered. Less myth, more man. His hands trembled when he poured wine. His left leg dragged when he walked. But his mind, as always, was sharp. You shouldn't be here, he said. The walls have ears. So do I, she said. And I heard you were dead. Not dead, he muttered. Just buried. She eyed him warily. Why return now? Varian tapped a map on the table. Not the Empire. Not Winmore. Beyond. The East stirs again. The border raids were a test. Your mother's rebellion is just smoke to hide the fire. Elira frowned. What fire? Varian looked up, deadly calm. The Empire is collapsing. He explained everything in hushed tones. Years ago, Varian had uncovered a conspiracy among the highborn houses, an attempt to divide the Empire's resources, weaken the throne, and allow foreign powers in through the cracks. When he tried to expose it, the Empress branded him a traitor and had him exiled. But he had never truly left. Hidden within the palace's forgotten wing, he had watched the rot spread. Elindra's rebellion was no accident, it was encouraged by those who wanted chaos. Civil war weakens the borders, he said. Once the Empire is broken, they'll strike. Who? Kalen asked. Those who wait across the sea, Varian said. And not all of them are strangers. Elira stared at the map. Threads of betrayal. Whole generations complicit. She thought of the Empress's offer. Greater than, end your mother's treason, and Winmore is yours. Was it a test, or a trap? What would you have me do? She asked Varian. He leaned forward. Don't play their game. Burn the board. That night, back in their chamber, Elira sat awake while Kalen slept. She thought of her mother, waiting in cold towers. Of the Empress, sitting on a throne of lies. Of her uncle, crawling through shadows just to be heard. And of herself, neither noble enough to rule nor cruel enough to quit. She wasn't sure what path to take. But she knew the next move. At dawn, she went to the Empress. Not as a pawn, but as a flame. You knew he was alive, she said. The Empress didn't blink. Of course. You used me to draw him out. And now I've drawn you out as well. Elira stepped forward, placing a single scroll on the Empress's desk. The map of the eastern coasts. With troop markers. The Empress raised an eyebrow. How did you get this? I listened, Elira said. And I stole from a ghost. For a moment, silence. Then the Empress smiled. You really have become dangerous. I always was. You just underestimated how much. She turned and walked out. No bow. No permission asked. Kalen waited outside, sword at his side. What now? He asked. Elira looked toward the horizon. Now we go north, not to make peace. She mounted her horse, but to end the war. Snow fell like ash as Elira crossed the border into Winmore. The northern banners still fluttered on broken walls. The castles that once sang of home now bristled with foreign troops. Fires lit the ridges. War had carved its teeth into the land. Kalen rode beside her in silence. Behind them followed 24 riders, disgraced knights, fugitives, believers in her cause. They called themselves nothing. She liked it that way. The time for names had passed. Now there was only fire. Atop the crags of Hallowspire, Elira met her mother. Alindra stood alone, cloaked in wolfskin, her hair crowned with frost. She did not smile. I warned you, the queen said. Return, and you will bleed. And if I don't return, Elira replied, you'll burn. Alindra's lips curled. So you choose war? No, Elira said. I choose truth. Then she threw the scroll at her mother's feet, a copy of the same map she gave the Empress. Alindra unrolled it. Her eyes narrowed. This shows. Foreign armies, Elira interrupted. Waiting for our collapse. And while we rip ourselves apart, they gather strength. Kalen stepped forward. There's still time. If you both unite. Silence, Alindra snapped. But her hand trembled on the scroll. I trusted you once, she said to Elira, quieter now. I gave you to the Empire for peace. You gave me rebellion. I gave you my life, Elira hissed. You wanted a daughter on her knees. I became a woman standing. They stared at one another, the space between them colder than any winter. And then Alindra turned away. That night, Elira waited for the betrayal. It came before sunrise. A fire arrow struck her tent. Soldiers charged from the dark, her mother's men. But Elira had planned for this. Her loyalists fought back with precision. The snow turned red. Kalen found her near the command post, blade wet with blood. "They won't stop," he said. "You know that." "I know," she whispered. Then a cry echoed from the hills. A horn. Not hers. Not her mother's. A third army. The invaders had arrived. Iron banners. Ships along the frost-rimmed coast. Foreign war horns ringing through pine. Everything her uncle warned her about, the fire behind the smoke, was now real. In that moment, the North shattered. Elira and Elindra were forced to fight side by side as foreign blades descended upon Winmore. Their hatred became iron. Their love became shield. But war has no sentiment. Kalen fell first, struck down defending the pass. Elira screamed until her voice bled. Her mother came next, speared from behind while rallying the last defense. And Elira, broken but not bowed, raised her mother's sword and cleaved the enemy commander in two. When the snow settled, the invaders fled. Their mission failed. Their plan exposed. But Winmore was ashes. Elira stood among the corpses at dawn. No throne. No banners. No mother. Kalen's body lay wrapped in her old cloak. She knelt beside him, brushing snow from his lips. "I told you I wasn't done," she whispered. The wind did not answer. But the land did. Months passed. She rebuilt nothing. She named no court. She lit no beacon. Instead, she rode the northern roads, gathering survivors, warning towns, breaking up warlords. A shadow queen, crowned by firelight and fear. Children called her ash-faced Elira. Men called her Stormborn. She called herself nothing at all. She wore no jewels. Only scars. The Empire sent for her. She never answered. They sent threats. She sent bodies. They sent gold. She burned it. One night, a girl approached her fire. Freckled, star-eyed, no more than 13. "You're her, aren't you?" Elira looked up. "I'm no one." The girl shook her head. "No, you're the one who didn't give up." And Elira, for the first time in a long while, smiled. Just a little. Epilogue. Years later, travelers told tales of a red-haired woman who walked the borderlands, sword at her hip, crown in her satchel, untouched. She was not a queen. She was not a ghost. She was a reckoning. And some say she still walks the snow, where peace once died, guarding the flame no empire could ever hold.